Hey everyone, so back at the Irving Park, and I'm just going to flip things around here. There's quite a bit of people, so it won't be long. I'll just go in the woods if there's too many people. Okay, here we are right at the start where I always start my videos, and there's a rose bush with some nice yellow flowers right there. There's some people coming from the trail. It's not as warm today, so probably why there's more people than when I usually come. Alright, I'm gonna take this. Some beautiful roses here. And a lot of traffic. Just gonna give a chance for these people to finish coming through here. Alright. And here we go. So, like I said, if there's a lot of people, sometimes I'll just deviate off the trail so I don't have to edit as much, and also stop my own rhythm. Today, I want to continue off of what I've talked about this morning, where I talked about the roles that we play. And I could have went on, obviously, for everything. There's so much to all of life that it's impossible to get anything in a short video. And when you try to wrap things around a concept, it is almost impossible to fully explain things. But I try anyways. But yeah, so the roles that I talked about today was like the observer, the participant, the creator, the victim, the rescuer. I think it was like the challenger or something like that. I know the power of TED. I don't know it as much as my friend Daniel, who recommended it. I never really got into the book, to be honest. But it's interesting concepts for sure. The other roles that I could have talked about was simpler roles, such as, well, what job do you have? And most people, when they are asked, who are you? They answer, well, I'm a construction worker, I'm a dentist, I'm a doctor, I'm a this and that. So we take our roles as far as our occupations very seriously, as we believe it defines us in some way. And then if you have kids, you probably call yourself a father or mother. If you're a kid, you have a mother and a father, but you're a kid, and most of the time kids are not seen, but they are basically told that they are, in a sense, lesser, because they have to listen to their parents. And of course there's some valid reasons because of in that, I should say. But most of the time we forget that sometimes a parent acts like a kid and a kid acts like a parent. And what I mean is other roles that we often play is I'm a student or I'm a teacher, and that's often the roles that we say kids have. They're students, parents are the teacher. So how many times do kids end up being big teachers for their parents? So hoping you're seeing what I'm trying to get at here. Just give me a second. I'm just gonna put the wrist strap on so it doesn't dangle. It was all right. So let's say you take your role very seriously as a parent, and then your child teaches you something. You can get offended. How dare you? I'm supposed to be the teacher here. And this happens so often, like when we do end up taking our roles seriously, which often happens, very, very often happens. So if you're, I don't know, a lawyer, and somebody talks to you about how the law works, and if you being the lawyer don't agree, well, you will interject and say, you don't know what you're talking about. I'm a lawyer and I do. And it's the same thing with any other profession, or maybe you just take spirituality for some reason, that I could become very sure of myself, overconfident, if you want to call it that nobody can teach me anything unless that they have been pursuing spirituality and meditation for at least 20 years, right? You can make a criteria, a threshold, in order for somebody to be able to teach me anything. And this is where, like, I'm hoping that you see that how this can become problematic, because then we become stuck in our ways, bullheaded, stubborn. And so instead of going this way, which is usually where I go, where the gazebo is and the waterfall is, but I'm going to go a different direction today. So, and then this is in a sense right now kind of innocent, the consequences of somebody taking their role seriously, right? All that happens is arguments. All that happens is some friction, and right, people might not talk to each other anymore. But what if this goes, and often goes, much further and becomes much more serious? So let's say I'm going to try to go as many people go when it comes to roles or things they believe that they are. So okay, so let's start with I'm a human. And that's the case for many people. If you're listening, you're probably a human. So after, you can say I'm white. And after, you could say I'm a Christian. And then you can add your job. I'm a plumber. Then you can add your nationality. I'm a Canadian. And I can add my sexual orientation. And then you can add your political affiliation. Your favorite hockey team. And then we can say anybody that doesn't match with all of these things that I am is my enemy. And then many people right now listening are probably thinking, Marcel, you're going a little bit too harshly with this. You're jumping in a sense quite far. Well, let me tell you about how, when we take our roles too seriously, what happens. So right now we have some conflicts going on in the world, right? And there's a defined enemy on all sides. So if the enemy happens to be anybody that's not the same nationality as you, then everybody that's not is your enemy. And you know, we often don't hear about how when we divide, every time we divide, I'm a human, I'm white, I'm a plumber, I'm a Montreal Canadiens fan, I'm from New Brunswick, I'm this and that. You separate yourself from all the rest of the world. There is who aligns with who you are and who is excluded. So I'm going to give you not a political, because I just gave you a political reason, which is the conflicts, right? You know what I'm talking about. I can't really start talking about like certain countries that are in conflict right now. So if I do, I might get this video flagged, and I don't want that to happen, and I don't want to get too involved in the conversations with people who take sides. So there's also, when it comes to roles that we play, I'm going to give you just a quick example. There's prison. In the prison, there's prison guards and prisoners. And we all know who sticks together in these situations, right? Prison guards stick together and the prisoners stick together. And we can say, well, that's natural. In this case, in a sense, it is. But what if I say that there's been experiments done? If you look at the Stanford prison experiment, where they took participants to conduct an experiment, and these participants were divided between prison guard and prisoner. And they did this because, well, they wanted to see how they would treat each other, more or less. It was more than that, but I'd rather keep it simple. So the experiment started with the clearly defined roles. You're a prison guard, then there's prisoners, and I think it took around 2 weeks before they had to stop the experiment, because both sides have become mortal enemies. And prison guards had already started really mistreating the prisoners. So they stopped it because they knew if it continued that it was going to escalate into full-fledged riot and possibly even some killings. So this is what happens when you take your roles too seriously. You start to see anybody else that's not aligned with who we identify ourselves with as the enemy. So I guess it's not necessarily the roles that we assign, but how we end up taking it too seriously, or how we become attached to the said roles. And if you look at this, if you happen to just look at it and just stop and look at what I'm trying to say here, you will see that this plays a big role in the divide between every single being. And it's like the saying goes, a house divided can't stand. Well, look at our society and take in consideration what I just talked about, how doctors end up sticking together, and then you have plumbers sticking together, and then everybody else that's not a plumber is outside the group. And then we look down on people who are not part of the group. And then we can justify mistreating those that are not part of the group because of whatever. Come up with a reason. Every other group does. And I want you to also think about how this is often something like the mentality and the behavior of these said groups is often how we characterize cults. So, depending on how far the group gets as far as maybe solidarity and exclusion of anybody else that's not part of the group, do you see how there's a fine line between groups and cults? And it happens within a very short period of time, where there was at first tolerance for others who were not part of the group. But all of a sudden, all there needs to be is a rally cry. It could be an event. It could be a person that is around that rally cry. And then boom. Even before there was two groups and they more or less got along, all of a sudden no more. And then they can become mortal enemies very quickly, which is what happens when there's conflicts between countries. They weren't always in a big conflict. So what happened? Well, there was a sort of rally cry. Some perceived injustice happened. Then there was a scapegoat, somebody to blame. And then mistreatment towards that group became acceptable. And this shows us that people get attached to labels. They take labels and their roles too seriously. And when that happens, it's only a matter of time before things can get ugly. And this is a divide that we all feel inside. Or I shouldn't say all of us, but most of us. We feel separated from nature. So we justify in poisoning nature, which, by the way, this is rooted in empiricism. Mr. Francis Bacon came up with empiricism and said basically that nature is feminine. Nature holds all its secrets. And in order to get the answers out of nature, we have to beat it into submission. Because nature will not divulge its secrets unless it is brutal, unless it is, tortured. So I'm just gonna, there's a family here. I'm just gonna go this direction. So I'm trying to give out examples here so you see how when we divide ourselves or exclude ourselves or say we're part of a group, right? Then we can justify mistreating any other people that is not part of the group. And that's a sense, a very lost soul who believes that, well, I'm separate from nature. What do you mean you're separate from nature? It's nature versus humans. What do you mean by that? We're part of it. How can we say it's nature against us when we're absolutely a part of it? What is the remedy to this? Right? What's the opposite of being separated? We've talked about this a lot. About being united, being whole, recognizing that you are another me. And if you recognize yourself in other people or other things, you're less likely to become brutal towards anything else. And do you see value in being whole, undivided, to heal, and all these things now? A divided mind will see enemies everywhere. A united mind will embrace everything. Yet so few people see this. So many people are trying to tell us that the war is within. The war is within our minds. And if we can just step into our hearts, just for a short period of time, we might start understanding what I'm talking about. But even at that, there's many of us that are divided in our hearts. We have hate, we have anger, we have resentment, jealousy, and that needs to be rectified too, right? The darkness that's in our heart too is a major obstacle towards peace. And yeah, so I would say stay in your heart, but some of us, our hearts are quite dark. So it is not simply or only an issue of the mind. It can be cold-hearted, right? The heart is divided. But if our heart is pure, our heart is okay, then I would suggest that you spend some time in there to get in touch with a different perspective that's more unified, compassionate, empathetic, and etc. I'm going to try cutting right here. I don't want to go in the road right now. See where I can connect with the next trail. Oh, it's just right here. That's what I thought it was. Very far. The cars are passing right here. So yeah, if you have a mind that is divided and you are aware that you're divided because you spend a lot of time talking about what's worthy, what's unworthy, who's right, who's wrong. See, in this divide, I could have gone on, like there's so much to be said about this divide. When I was in university, I remember I was in psychology, but I went into psychology with a Bachelor of Arts instead of the Bachelor of Science. So me, in a sense, even at that time, I was artsy and I was also scientific at the same time. And I remember when I was talking to psychology professors and I would talk to them about music, art, philosophy. Oh my goodness. When it was philosophy, psychologists had almost a phobia with philosophy, where when they heard philosophy talked about, they completely shut down and they didn't want to talk about it. And you know what? The same thing happened when somebody that was in philosophy was talked to about science. So within the school, within the university, it was science versus arts. And yeah, this is a good example because they stopped talking to each other because they took their roles very seriously, and in a sense, the definitions that they had in their mind, they were polar opposites with nothing in common other than the fact that they were part of a university. For some reason they seem to really forget that one. They kind of like say, well, we tolerate each other under the same roof. I'm wondering how that feels inside that house, right? It's not a very comfortable feeling when you have a family split. And it's like I said earlier, a house divided cannot stand. So, anyways, but yeah, we take our roles way too seriously. We take ourselves way too seriously. And this just demonstrates a lack of knowing who we are. If we knew who we are, we would not continuously divide ourselves and then pick enemies that seemingly contradict what we are all about. So I'm hoping you're starting to see the picture I'm trying to draw here that the society we live in is dysfunctional because people have been pitted against each other. It's the old adage of divide and conquer. And if you're able to divide the people and say to the plumbers that the enemies are electricians, and then they start fighting against each other, then you can rule over them because they're too busy fighting against each other. And the real enemy is actually us that's promoting this division. We're the instigator, right? But I guess I should add that it's not the fault of the instigator. If somebody is easily swayed, easily influenced to the point that they can start saying that electricians are the enemy, that person is already quite gone, quite lost. And all that happened with this divide and conquer strategy, all that happened was basically a little nudge was given to that individual, and that's all it needed, was that straw on the back to reach a breaking point. And now they concluded that the enemy is electricians, or I don't know, enemy is conservatives, or the enemy is liberals, or some sort of thing like that. Or like I said, another country. Or like Francis Bacon was trying to tell us, that the enemy was nature. And is it any wonder with that attitude? And now we know that empiricism is huge. One of the biggest parts of science. You need to empirically prove things. So this empiricism has really planted the seed of division between man and nature, and we spray nature. We basically abuse her by polluting things. That's something I've been looking into lately, and it's quite disturbing. In India, the Ganges River, which is, I think, our most sacred body of water, has been polluted to the point where it's absolutely disgusting. How can you do that to something that you regard as sacred? Well, because nature is out there maybe to serve humans. Maybe that's the kind of attitude that they come up with that justifies polluting a river to the point that it's toxic now. So you're hearing rumblings. I'm getting to the end. I'm getting close to the parking lot, and I imagine there's a bunch of bikes, so I'm gonna have to cut it a little bit earlier before it gets really noisy. So yeah, I love you. I'm wishing you a holistic, undivided mindset. I wish for you healing, so you attain that mindset that's undivided. Hoping that you love each other. I'm hoping you love each other and yourself. Never exclude yourself. It's very concerning when people become selfless. They start forgetting about themselves, and then we thought that the problem was selfishness. It is a divided mind. that is filled with fear. That is the enemy. So the divided mind and fear are most of our biggest enemies, because they split us off from everything else. So anyways, I wish you healing. I love you all very deeply. And until next time.